Okay, so today I'm gonna show you how to find a missing angle using the trig functions. Yesterday all we did was set up the ratios. Today we're gonna do some of that as well, and we need to be able to do that in order to find the missing ratios. Okay, so let's start with a problem like this. You actually did a problem almost identical to this yesterday. So what I want you to do for starters is just find these ratios that are grayed out here. I've given you this triangle, and I want you to find sine, cosine, tangent of A. We're not going to worry about the other three functions today. Just let's worry about those three. So go ahead and fill out the fractions that go in this gray box. Just as a reminder, we're talking about angle A, which forces this side to be the opposite. This is the adjacent, and that is the hypotenuse. Hopefully you identified them that way. And those are the three ratios you should have gotten. Raise your hand if you had that. Okay, really good. So, here's the reason we need to do that. We're going to find the angles. Obviously, we know B already. Okay. And I want to show you how to find the angle. So over here, so instead if you went the inverse cosine, you'd use this ratio. If you use the inverse tangent, you'd use this ratio. So go ahead and test that out and make sure that it still gives you 43.6 for those other two functions. So we're going to use those ratios to find the missing angles. And this is where you're going to need your calculator. Okay. Because instead, we're actually going to do, so we're going to use sine. Okay. We know that sine of A is 20 over 29. And you can use the inverse of sine, which is called the arc sine, to solve for the angle. Now the inverse, as we've talked about before, that -1 power usually means inverse. It usually doesn't actually mean the power of -1. Okay? So here's what it's going to look like when you're going to enter it in your calculator. But first, before we enter it in our calculator, you have to make sure. And I know some of you had this issue when we were working in the Sarah app a little bit. You have to make different ratio that your calculator is in degree mode. And I purposefully only capitalize the DEG. So on some of your calculators, especially the TI-30X's, okay, you'll see that on the sort of standard. You'll see the DEG, or you'll see an RAD. We want to be in degree mode. Now, for you guys with the graphing calculators, what I want you to do right now is I want you to go into your mode. I believe there's a mode button. And press it. Okay? And if you notice the third line down, you see something that says radian, and you see something that says degree. Make sure degree is highlighted. If radian is highlighted, it's not going to work the way you want it to. Okay? And you can toggle back and forth just to make sure you know how to work your calculator. But just so you guys are aware, we will eventually work with radians this year. But just so you're clear, a radian is a different way to measure an angle. I know you're only used to degrees, but it's just like measuring the length of something, right? There's lots of different ways to measure the length of something. You could do it in inches, in centimeters, in feet, in miles, you know what I mean? There's different measurements for the same thing. It is also true for angles. There's different ways to measure angles. And degrees is just one of them that we typically use the most. So make sure before you start, and this is the thing with the graphing calculators, if you are in a situation with, for some reason, you have to reset your calculator, it will default to radian mode, not degree mode. So that's going to be really important to make sure that you've got it there. Okay. Everybody there? Anybody having an issue getting there? All right. So now once we do that, here's where our calculator comes in. You're going to actually enter the inverse sine or the arc sine of 20 over 29. Now, you're not going sine to the negative 1. You're doing the second function of the sine. Okay, and it should just give you that automatically sine to the negative 1, which means inverse or arc sine. You will get a set of parentheses. You want to make sure you close the parentheses. And then that number that you get is the degrees of angle A. So what did you get? 43.6. We can round to the nearest tenth or the nearest hundredth, either one. Most of the time I think it's going to tell you nearest tenth. So let's adjust this a little bit. Okay, 43.6. How many got that? Okay, good. Now, I happen to choose the sine for that problem. Okay, but we had all three ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent. So what I want you to do next is to actually figure out and make sure and verify to you, okay, that if you do the arc cosine or the inverse cosine and the inverse tangent, that you still get 43.6. Now, obviously, okay, so we're doing arc cosine or again the inverse. It's the same thing. Okay, make sure that you still get 43.6. Any issues? How many were able to verify that it's still 43.6 either way, regardless of which one you use? Raise your hands. Okay, so here's the deal, okay? For this next problem, I'm going to break it up just to make sure that we actually do this right. First of all, are there any questions before we look at the next problem? So here's the next problem. We're looking for angle X. So here's how I'm going to break this up. Here's what I want. I want this row, look up at me please. This row and over, I want you guys using the sine to find the angle. Okay? I want this row and Hunter to use the cosine. Dylan, Stephanie, and everybody else, the tangent. Okay? And the reason I can pick any one of them is I've been given all three sides. So the sine, the cosine, and the tangent will allow me to find angle X. Okay? So do that. Okay, so here's what you should have used to set up. Okay? How many had those set up correctly? Raise your hand. Alright. Now hopefully we all got the same thing. What do they all equal? Alright, Zach, what'd you get? 53.1. 53.1. Caroline, what'd you get? 53.1. Chaz, what'd you get? 56.9.
I got 56.
Okay, so you actually found angle Z. Tyler, what'd you get? 53.1, yeah. They all equal 53.1. So Chaz, I'll come around and see what you did there. How many got it? 53.1. Okay, now here's how I know you found angle Z. Okay, 53.1 here. Since this is already 90, these two have to add up to 90. Okay, so 36.9 is going to be this one. Okay. Now, these types of problems are sort of unique because most of the time they're not going to give you all three sides, and you don't actually need to find all three sides. the number of sides and which particular sides they give us will dictate which function we use instead of just being able to pick out of any of them. Okay? Like here, and that's what this says. Most of the time you're only going to be given two sides, and those sides will tell you which function you use. So here are the types of problems you're going to see. Now if you want to screenshot this from your book, these two problems are on page 1779. Okay? I'll kind of walk you through the first one a little bit and then have you finish it. So for A, we're trying to find angle N. Okay? They give us 6 and 10. So in relationship to angle N, what side is 6? Opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Opposite. This is the opposite side. What is 10? Hypotenuse. So which function do you think I'm going to have to use to figure out angle N? Sine. Okay, because I'm dealing with opposite and hypotenuse, I'm going to be forced into, well, I mean, you're not forced into it. If you really wanted to find this side, you could, but why do the extra work if you don't have to? Okay? So go ahead and do that one. And then, when you're done with A, go ahead and do B. Using the same idea. Identify the sides given, and then based off of those sides, decide which function you have to use. So, here's what we should have. So there is A. So again, we have the opposite and the hypotenuse, so that's the inverse sine, 6 over 10. And you could just put that right in your calculator. This is the extent of the work I need you to show. Okay, you don't have to reduce 6 over 10. I don't care about that for this particular case because you're just using your calculator to generate the answer anyway. And you should have got 36.9 degrees. How many had that? Very good. Now, for B, so we're talking about this angle here. The sides that we have, first of all, we have the hypotenuse. What is 8? Adjacent side. So which function are we talking about? Cosine. Okay. So I should have the inverse cosine, 8 over 16. That should have been 60 degrees. How many had that? Okay, that's what we're doing today. Any questions? Tomorrow I'll show you how to find a missing side. And then Friday we're going to review. If you did not already complete the second half of 25 through 28 on the SARE app, it is due Thursday. Make sure you get on top of that too.